Chapter 11. A Beautiful Rat. Jonathan stood pinned in the light. He blinked his eyes and squinted up at the looming shadow before him. I'm just... He took another step back, but a hand reached out and grabbed hold of his sleeve.
"Get in here," the voice rumbled. "Otherwise they will."
Jonathan was pulled by his arm through the door. It slammed shut behind him and the hand released him. He shrank back against the closed door. The light in the room wasn't as bright as it had first seemed, after a stumbling nightmare in the total darkness. It was just candles, 8 or 9 of them, and one sputtering lantern. Jonathan blinked and looked around. The room was full of books. Shelves lined the stone walls, each covered end to end with large, leather-bound books. Low bookshelves divided the middle of the room, also full of neatly lined volumes, with more books standing up on top between heavy iron bookends. Along one wall were evenly spaced window wells, deep and arched, but their views were blocked by leaning rows of books standing on their sills. Jonathan knew in an instant that he'd stumbled into Slabhenge's library, and it had a librarian. He eyed the flickering candles nervously. A bunch of candles in a room full of books didn't seem like a great idea. Even in a prison made entirely of stone. He resisted the urge to jump and blow them out.
"Come for a book, did ye? Come to see what we have?"
Jonathan looked to the source of the voice. The man was old, incredibly old, impossibly old. His face was deeply lined with wrinkles and creases. He was thin and must have once been very tall before he'd gotten so stooped over. He peered at Jonathan from behind thick, smudged glasses that magnified his eyes to silver dollars, shiny blue. His hair was thin and pure white and long, draping over his shoulders and far down his back. He held his head to the side and tilted down so his eyes had to look up into Jonathan's. A shy smile snuck onto his lips, revealing small, crooked yellow teeth, but the smile scurried quickly away into the shadows.
"Or else who will get in?"
Jonathan finally managed to croak. The man's eyebrows crinkled, and he frowned.
"I'm sorry?"
"When you pulled me in, you said get in or else they would. Who?" The man's smile returned and stayed. He leaned a little closer to Jonathan.
"Why, the rats, of course. They will. Come in. And we don't like them to."
Jonathan licked his lips and looked away from the man's eerie smile and shining eyes. "No, I guess not."
"It's been a long time," the man said. "A very long time since we've had a visitor that wasn't a rat."
Jonathan just stood there blinking stupidly. His mind was still wandering in the dark in a world where all the grown-ups were dead.
"Go ahead. Take a look. Around. Pick one out. Or two."
The man's little smile came and went as he spoke, like a bobbing lantern on a boat lost in the fog. He took a step back and spread his arms.
"Any book you like?"
Jonathan took a breath and stepped past him and into the shelves of Slabhenge's library. The books were all old. Their spines were cracked and painted with the gold words of their titles. Some of them Jonathan recognized. Most he did not. Their pages were yellowed and worn. The smell of leather and ink and old paper mixed and mingled with the candlelight and filled the room. All the books, despite their age, shone with a well-cared-for light. There were no cobwebs in this forgotten library, no dust on these ancient books.
"What do ye like? To read?"
The librarian's voice trailed along behind him as he scanned the shelves.
"Adventure, is it? Jonathan Swift? Mysteries, perhaps? Sherlock Holmes?"
"I used to read a lot," Jonathan answered softly, his eyes exploring the titles of the books as his fingers slid over their spines.
"Before coming here?"
"Not exactly, just before." Jonathan's finger stopped on a dark, well-worn spine. The librarian leaned in to see where Jonathan was looking. He stayed there, his face close to Jonathan's.
Ah, Hamlet. A play, that is. By Shakespeare, of course. A good one. Dark. A prince. A ghost. A murder in a castle. And poor Ophelia. Hamlet loved her, but he thought it was his fault. Her dying.
The librarian sighed.
To be or not to be.
Jonathan pursed his lips and kept walking. He suddenly didn't feel like any book at all. He felt like being back where all the grown-ups were dead. I've got to go, thanks.
But ye've got no book.
It's all right, I don't need one. The librarian gave him a long, steady look.
We want you to take a book. Don't worry about the Admiral and his rules. These books are for reading.
Jonathan's mind raced. The old librarian didn't know about the Admiral, about the lightning. Are you always here just by yourself? The librarian smiled his fleeting smile again.
Oh, yes, yes. We are always alone. We don't like them, the Admiral, the others, and they don't like us.
When's the last time you saw them? The old man shrugged and looked away, scanning the shelves.
Don't know, 3, 4 maybe.
4 days? Without seeing anyone? The librarian smiled a wide, staying smile. He looked up at Jonathan in his strange, sideways way.
No. 4 years. 4 years without seeing anyone. At least.
Jonathan's mouth dropped open. What? How? Don't you get lonely? The man cackled a dry, coughing laugh.
No. We have our books. We have our stories.
What do you eat? I mean, how do you get food?
We go down in the very dark middle of the night, and we bring back what we need. The Admiral leaves us alone, and we leave him alone.
Oh, okay. The librarian pulled a book from the shelf and pressed it into Jonathan's hands.
Here, start with this one.
Jonathan looked down. The book was thick, with a red, pictureless cover. In plain gold script on the cover was the title, Robinson Crusoe.
It's about getting stuck on an island, the librarian winked at him, with bloodthirsty natives.
Thanks. The old man just nodded. As they walked back toward the door, the man stooped down to pick up a large cat off a chair. He held it in one arm and stroked it with his other.
Read it, bring it back when you're done, and then you can have another book.
He patted Jonathan on the shoulder and left his wrinkled hand resting there.
We'll be here.
Okay. You and your cat.
No. Me and 99 here.
The old man smiled and held the cat out toward him. Right, Jonathan said, reaching out to pet the cat. You and your cat... Jonathan gasped and jerked his hand back. The animal he'd been reaching out to pet was not a cat at all. It was a rat. A beady-eyed, pink-tailed, black-coated rat that was bigger than most cats he'd seen. Its eyes glittered up at him above 2 huge top front teeth that poked sharply out of its mouth. God, it's a rat! It's huge! The librarian laughed, a deeper laugh than before. His eyes closed when he laughed.
Yes, he giggled and stroked the rat gently from its head to its naked ringed tail. My big, beautiful boy. 99 is his name.
That's the biggest rat I've ever seen, by a long shot. Jonathan was backing toward the door. The librarian giggled again and nodded.
Yes, very big. Years and years. It took me. A lifetime. Always bigger.
The monstrous rat leaned back into the librarian's scratching fingers. You made him that big? How?
Oh, time. Patience. Attention. Years. I found the very biggest. Rats. One boy, one girl, and I put them together."
The rat's tail curled lovingly around his arm.
"I let the babies grow, just a little, to find the biggest, and I let the others go after I cut off their tails."
"You cut off their tails?" Another smile spread across the librarian's lined face.
"Of course. So I would know who they were. Brothers and sisters can't make babies, you know. And I would find another, big one, with a tail, and make more babies. And again. And again. So many times. So many tails. And always bigger."
A cloud passed over the old man's face, erasing his smile.
"I almost lost it all. Was 76. She wouldn't have babies. Couldn't, I was afraid."
His smile returned and the cloud lifted.
"But then she did. And they were beautiful. And big."
Goosebumps rose on Jonathan's arms. "You mean this is your 99th rat?"
"Oh, no," the man chuckled. "Much more than that. I just stopped counting. 100 sounds so ugly. It's no kind of name for a beautiful rat."
"Oh, right." Jonathan put his hand on the doorknob and turned it.
"You'll come back? To us? And another book?"
"Yeah, sure," he answered, opening the door to the inky blackness of the passageway.
"We hope so. How are things going out there?"
The librarian's white eyebrows cocked out at the darkness looming past the doorway. Jonathan licked his lips. He smelled lightning, saw bodies in a freezer, heard a monster rattling an iron door and a bully taking control. "Fine, I guess."
"Oh, well,"
the librarian sighed again, wearily.
"It never stays fine for long. Things always go bad out there. So much evil and darkness, and so much more always coming. And that is why we stay here. Keep your wits about you."
Jonathan eyed the waiting corridor. At the edges of the light, furry shadows scrambled and hid. He wondered how many of them were missing tails. He licked his lips. "Can I borrow a candle?"